As significant as these accomplishments were, however, and knighthood would be his reward, what is little known is that Doyle was involved in many cases himself. In Search Of recreates one of them. Conan Doyle's secretary, Major Wood, was perhaps the prototype for Dr. Watson. One morning in 1906, he opened a letter which he thought would arouse Doyle's interest. It was from George Idalgi, an Anglo-Indian lawyer who, on weak circumstantial evidence, and possibly because of his ancestry, had been sentenced to 7 years in prison, charged with slashing and maiming horses with a razor. After serving 3 of these 7 years, he was inexplicably released, but without a pardon. Now he wrote to Doyle, asking to clear his name.
Morning, Alfred. Arthur, there's a letter here I think you ought to see. It's from a Mr. Idalgi, who, it appears, has been the butt of a gross miscarriage of justice.
Idalgi. Wasn't there an article in the Empire last month?
Yes, there was. He sent it with his letter. It's amongst those.
Ah, yes, I remember. Extraordinary case. I'll have another look at it.
As I read, the unmistakable accent of truth forced itself upon my attention, and I realized that I was in the presence of an appalling tragedy, and that I was called upon to do what I could to set it right. I got other papers in the case, went up to Staffordshire, saw the family, and went over the scene of the crime. Between Idalgi's house and the place where the final mutilation was committed lay the full breadth of the London and North Western Railway, an expanse of rails, wires, and other obstacles, with hedges to be forced on either side, so that I, a strong and active man, in broad daylight, found it a hard matter to pass. Not until I had examined every fact thoroughly from every angle did I arrange to question Idalgi. The meeting took place at my hotel. I had been delayed, and he was passing the time by reading the paper. I recognized my man by his dark face, so I stood and observed him. Mr. Idalgi, I presume.
Oh, Sir Arthur.
Do you suffer from astigmatic myopia?
This is indeed an honor.
Look, don't you wear glasses?
Never have, Sir Arthur. They can't fit me glasses that are any use. I have been to 2 ophthalmic surgeons, and both...
The idea of such a man scouring the fields at night and assaulting animals while avoiding the watchful police was ludicrous to anyone who can imagine what the world looks like to eyes with myopia of 8 diopters. So bad was his defense in his trial that no mention, as far as I could ascertain, was ever made of the fact that the man was practically blind.
Finally, Doyle wrote a series of articles in the Daily Telegraph. They provoked the public outcry, and Doyle was invited to a meeting with the Home Secretary. Not satisfied with simply clearing Idalgi's name, Doyle now set out to discover the identity of the real slasher. Before long, he began receiving threatening letters with a seaport postmark, providing him with the clues he needed. Clearly, the letters were written by a disturbed, perhaps pathological man who also despised foreigners. Doyle then traced Idalgi's history from the time of the crimes backwards, all the way to Idalgi's grammar school. Had there been a fellow student with a vicious nature, a hatred against foreigners, and a grudge against Idalgi himself, and who subsequently went to sea? There had. Doyle discovered his present whereabouts and learned he had quit the sea at the time the slashings began. He had been trained in a slaughterhouse, and he showed signs of periodic insanity. Doyle even got hold of a long horse lancet with which the slashings had undoubtedly been committed. The Law Society readmitted Idalgi to the role of solicitors. Although the Home Office granted Idalgi his pardon, they wouldn't agree to any compensation. However, the case in due course paved the way for establishing a court of criminal appeal. And this was only one of the good many real-life cases in which Doyle achieved success. Sherlock Holmes and his creator were inseparably linked. In his autobiography, Doyle admitted,
A man cannot spin a character out of his own inner consciousness and make it really lifelike, unless he has some of that character within him.
The horse-drawn carriages of 1895 may have disappeared, but the living presence of Sherlock Holmes of Baker Street persists to this day. Nearly 100 years after A Study in Scarlet, letters still come into that address at 221B Baker Street, now the offices of an insurance company who reply on Sherlock Holmes' behalf.
And this one's from San Diego, California. It's addressed to Mr. Sherlock Holmes or Dr. John Watson, MD.
For those who believe Sherlock Holmes was only a figment of a writer's imagination, In Search of humbly submits its deduction that he did, in a very real way, exist. In Search of records the work of scientists, researchers, and a group of highly skilled technicians. This episode was based on research derived from the In Search of book.